We are taught that wealth is a number in a bank account. We are taught that the more gold you have, the more powerful you are. But history has a brutal way of correcting those who confuse currency with value. In 1324, the richest human being to ever walk the earth stepped out of the West African desert and into the global spotlight. His name was Mansa Musa, the Emperor of Mali. His wealth was so vast it remains immeasurable by modern standards. Some estimate $400 billion. Others say it was simply infinite. He didn't just own gold, he controlled the source of half the world's supply. But Mansa Musa is not a legend because of how much he had. He is a legend because of what happened when he tried to share it. This is the story of a man who was so rich he accidentally destroyed the economies of entire nations. It is the story of the hyperinflation trap, a phenomenon that crashed the 14th century world and is currently haunting the global economy in 2026. Because while the medium of exchange has changed from gold dust to digital digits, the trap remains exactly the same. When everyone is rich, no one is. Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim. In 1324, he decided to perform the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. But this wasn't a humble journey. It was a 2,700-mile military and financial operation. His caravan consisted of 60,000 men. 12,000 of them were personal slaves, each dressed in Persian silk and carrying a staff of pure gold weighing 6 pounds. Behind them followed 80 camels, each carrying up to 300 pounds of gold dust. Imagine the psychological impact. To the medieval world, Africa was a mystery, a dark continent of rumors. Then, suddenly, a king appears with more gold in his luggage than the entire treasury of Europe. He wasn't just traveling, he was projecting power. He was the 14th century version of a central bank, walking through the desert. As he moved through the cities of Cairo, Medina, and Mecca, Musa did something that seemed noble at the time. He gave. He handed out gold bars to the poor. He built a new mosque every Friday. He spent lavishly in the markets, paying whatever price the merchants asked. He flooded the Egyptian economy with tens of thousands of pounds of high-purity gold. Mansa Musa thought he was being a savior. He thought he was using his surplus to lift the world. He was wrong. Within months of his departure from Cairo, the economy of Egypt began to rot. Gold was the global reserve currency. Its value came from its scarcity. By dumping a massive supply into a local market, Musa didn't make people richer, he made the gold worthless. Prices for basic goods, bread, oil, meat, skyrocketed. The merchants, seeing the endless supply of gold, tripled their prices. The gold in a commoner's pocket could suddenly buy only a fraction of what it could the week before. This was the first recorded case of hyperinflation caused by a single individual. The value of gold in the Mediterranean dropped by 25% and stayed depressed for over a decade. Mansa Musa had effectively robbed the very people he tried to help. By devaluing the currency, he wiped out the life savings of the middle class in Cairo and Medina. He turned a thriving trade hub into a recession-hit wasteland. On his way back to Mali, Musa realized the damage he had done. In a desperate attempt to fix it, he began borrowing back gold from Egyptian lenders at high interest rates. He tried to contract the money supply. He tried to play the role of a central banker, but the damage was done. Mansa Musa Trap had been sprung. Fast forward to the present. The gold dust has been replaced by the US dollar, the euro, and the yen. But the strategy of the golden caravan is being deployed by modern governments with terrifying precision. Between 2020 and 2026, global central banks performed their own pilgrimage. To save a crashing world, they printed trillions of dollars, the digital equivalent of Musa's 80 camels. They flooded the markets with stimulus, thinking that increasing the amount of money in people's hands would increase their wealth. But you cannot print value. Value is a reflection of goods, services, and scarcity. When you increase the money supply without increasing the production of what that money buys, you get Cairo in 1324. You get 20% grocery inflation. You get a housing market where a starter home costs 10 times the average salary. The elite of 2026 are using the Mansa Musa Trap to perform a massive wealth transfer. Just as the merchants in Cairo raised prices to soak up Musa's gold, modern corporations and asset owners have raised prices to soak up the cheap money printed by the Fed. The result? The 1% own the assets, while the rest of the world holds devalued paper. However, there is a second half to Mansa Musa's story that the history books often gloss over. When he returned to Mali, he didn't just sit on his remaining gold. He realized that gold was a liability if it wasn't backed by something permanent. He invested his remaining wealth into intellectual infrastructure. He brought back the greatest architects from Spain. He brought back scholars from Baghdad. He built the University of Sankore in Timbuktu. He turned Mali into the global center for education, law, and trade. He realized that the only thing more valuable than gold is knowledge and network. He stopped focusing on the currency and started focusing on the system. While the gold he gave away in Cairo eventually vanished or devalued, the libraries of Timbuktu stood for centuries. In 2026, the lesson is clear: if you are holding gold, whether that's cash in a high-yield savings account or a speculative stock, you are at the mercy of the next Mansa Musa who decides to flood the market. Your only protection is to convert that currency into permanent assets. Education. Land. Proprietary systems. Networks. The world is currently in a state of currency fever. We are obsessed with the price of things, while ignoring the value of things. The Mansa Musa Trap tells us that any asset that can be easily multiplied is an asset that will eventually be worthless. Gold was the hard money of the 14th century, yet even it couldn't survive a massive supply shock. Today, we look for harder money. We look to Bitcoin, to land, to commodities that can't be summoned by a king's decree or a central banker's keystroke. But the ultimate wealth playbook isn't about hoarding. It's about circulation. Mansa Musa's true legacy wasn't the inflation in Cairo, it was the transformation of Timbuktu. He moved from being a spender to being a builder. Are you spending your gold in the markets of Cairo, or are you building the university of your own future? The 1% know that a crash is coming because they are the ones riding the camels. They are the ones dumping the gold. If you want to survive the 2026 transition, you need to stop being a consumer of their currency and start being an owner of their infrastructure. This is history's wealth playbook. The gold is moving. Make sure you're in its path, not in its wake.